Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here. I hope you're all having a lovely day, but I did want to make a video talking about Age of Sigmar Stormground. Thanks to the developers over at, I believe, Gasket Games, I was able to get early access to try out the game, play through a decent amount of it, and kind of formulate my thoughts and really delve deep into the game. Which, honestly, I'm glad I did, because I have mixed feelings about this game. Because I'm just going to kind of get right into it. I don't want to, waste everybody's time. But there's a lot of good in this game, but there's also a few issues. So to kind of get us all on the same page, this is the first Age of Sigmar video game that was designed as a video game. There are, of course, two others that precede it, being Warhammer Underworlds Online and Age of Sigmar Champions, but those are tabletop games that were basically made so they could exist in a digital format. They were not video games or originally intended to be video games. They are something that have occurred later and are literally just one-to-one copies. So this is really Age of Sigmar's first true foray into being a video game. And for that reason, going into it, I was honestly not expecting a lot. Games Workshop is very infamous with how they handle the video game market, which is essentially they cast a very wide net and basically seem to allow just about anybody to take a crack at their IPs, which has resulted in there being a lot of very poor quality games for Warhammer Fantasy and 40k. Now, I am happy to say this is not one of those games. Stormground is a good game. There are some things I think holding it back from being great, but it is a good game. So, what the game is that Stormground is a battle game where you fight using small armies on a hexagonal grid, essentially. And it's one of those systems that it seems very simple at first. When I actually played through my first campaign, which the first campaign has a very basic tutorial that doesn't teach you nearly as much as it should, in my opinion. You play as the Stormcast, and you basically have to beat their first campaign before you unlock the other two races, which are the Nighthaunts and the Maggotkin of Nurgle, both of whom I think are exceptionally more complicated. The Stormcast do have a lot of interesting things you can do with them, especially later on, but the other two have a lot of the really wacky mechanics. But in any event, you fight on these hexagonal boards. If you've played Civilization, or more accurately, Endless Legends, if you've played Endless Legends, you might have a vague idea of what you're kind of walking into, where it also had a hexagonal grid battle system, and you fought with, like, either a single entity kind of monster or character, and then there were, like, small units that had, like, 3 guys, and if they took enough damage, like, one of the little dudes would die, and they had very basic animations and stuff. This is kind of like that, but a lot deeper, and frankly superior when it comes to a battle system. Obviously, that's unfortunately the only thing it's really got going for it, in a sense, but the whole game revolves around it. Now, I will say, the things that the battle system in and of itself is very fun. I think it's very enjoyable. You have just an obscene amount of customization when playing through campaigns. Because the thing about the game is, you may have seen some of the advertisements that looked like there was like a whole bunch of cards. They're not cards. Basically, there is loot that you can pick up, and the way that they decided to represent the loot is as cards, or, they kind of look like cards, and they have like a cost for what it takes to summon them on the field and stuff, but it is not a deck builder. It's not remotely related to cards whatsoever. It's just a way to kind of categorize everything. So when you play through the campaign, regardless of who you choose, you basically will start off with a main character you will follow their story as you play through a roguelike adventure, where you essentially work your way through a map on one of the mortal realms, either Shyish starting off if you're playing the Stormcast, Gairan if you're playing as the Nighthaunts, and Shaman if you're playing as the Maggotkin of Nurgle. And you basically work your way through some maps, and every once in a while it'll give you like a split choice, but it is essentially procedurally generated. I didn't notice any obvious patterns. The only fight that seems completely guaranteed is the boss fight at the end of each realm. But you work your way through this realm, and essentially you pick a map, and you'll customize your warband to make sure that you're all ready to go. You've got the units you want, you equip any new upgrades you've picked up or any new powers, and then you'll go into the map and it'll give you an objective. And the objectives vary. Generally it's either, essentially there will be like this little prism or a little soul prison, but there will be this big thing with a whole bunch of health hiding at the back of the map, and it'll be like, okay, you need to fight your way to it and destroy it. And once it's dead, you win. There's also maps where it's like you need to lure out a evil enemy commander, and once you lure out that commander, you then must kill them, and that results in victory. And then the last one is that you just have to kill everybody. And then there is another one where it'll essentially ask you to capture some objective tiles. Usually there's 3 of them, and they form like a little triangle, and your goal is to hold at least 2 of them for a certain amount of turns. Usually it's like 2 or 3 turns. And so there's a decent amount of variety as far as what kinds of objectives you're going to be going for. And you work your way through all these maps. Occasionally it'll have a split choice where it'll tell you, okay, you can do either map A or map B, but it's rarely more than 2 options. And very rarely there will be an optional mission that comes up. Usually when you take a Storm Vault or essentially are attacking a realm gate, but this only occurs in the first campaign. Now, I will say that the first campaign, because there's 3 campaigns for each faction. When you move into the game, it'll say, okay, you're playing a Stormcast, you start on chapter 1, and then there's a second and a third chapter to the campaign, and then same thing for the Nighthaunts and the Maggotkin once you defeat the first Stormcast campaign. Now, this is the best and worst part of the game simultaneously, because the first campaign for each race is so fun. It is ridiculously fun. I wasn't super sold on the Stormcast at first until I realized it was a roguelike, because my units were dying as I was progressing, and I was like, my guys aren't coming back to life, and I don't have any more units. I'm not sure how this is possible to win. And then I died, and it sent me back and was like, okay, you get to keep your experience, the units you unlocked, and the weapons and abilities you unlocked, so you can then rebuild a warband so that when you start your next run through, you have a much stronger start to work with. And whenever you lose, you get sent back to the beginning, and you have all the new toys, plus any toys you've unlocked from prior runs. You design your warband to try and win that run, and then whenever you start a new run, you basically only have the equipment you took in with you, and then any equipment that you find during that run. You don't generally have access to your entire library of items and abilities and stuff as you're going through a run. However, this does make it where sooner or later you're going to like easily crush the first campaign. Once either your main character gets high enough level, or gets like a really strong item so they just become hilariously powerful, or you just get a few like really chunky units and get them up to a high level. But the thing is, when you're playing through the first campaign as each race, it has a great narrative. The voice acting in this game, it is like very nice. It is very nice voice acting. Sometimes it gets a little hammy. There were a few times where I would encounter something and just kind of, but you get used to it, and once you kind of get into it, I actually enjoyed it. But I would only say there were maybe 2 or 3 things where I did not like the voice they went with, and even then I got used to it. I think one of the most grating units you run into early on is when you're playing as the Stormcast. You'll run into some Bladegeist Revenants, which are Nighthaunts, and they just literally shout the entire time. But because they're talking to you in a narrative sense, it's really annoying. But when it's just them as a unit, it's totally fine. But yeah, the voice acting is fantastic. The Maggotkin of Nurgle in particular are hysterical as far as I'm concerned. They went with some really interesting direction on how to make them very whimsical or stand out. I don't want to like spoil their voices because bumping into them is genuinely hilarious. But it's also very fitting for Nurgle. Like, yeah, that's what I believe many of those Nurgle units and characters would sound like. The Night Haunts, for the most part, are very, very sinister and spooky. A lot of them have raspy voices, but the main character of the Night Haunt campaign, Pelagast the Pitiless, I love that character. Great character. But here's the issue. The game almost kind of... I feel like the game kind of misleads the player a little bit. I thought, when I started playing the game, that each campaign was a complete narrative, where you have Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, like the old school RTSs, and you have to like play through all the campaigns to finish a narrative. Unfortunately, that's not what it is. What it actually is that the first campaign is a narrative that has a bunch of dialogue, a lot of cool interactions. It suggests a lot of histories between the characters, and it seems like it's building up towards, oh, Chapter 2, but Chapter 2 is just a higher difficulty. It's not actually a new narrative. There is zero story once you do Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, which is a massive bummer. The difficulty is much higher, and I will warn you, this game does not pull its punches. Sometimes the AI will act a little goofy, and sometimes it will completely catch you off guard and like kill you in 2 turns. So, well, on the higher difficulties. But ultimately, I do think it's a really fun game. A part of me feels like it's unfinished almost in a few ways. It's a little buggy, not terrible. The game never crashed. There was never a bug that forced me to close the game or stop what I was doing. Most of the bugs I encountered would be something weird, like I would tell my units to attack or move somewhere, and for some reason it would just take them a really long time to do it. Like they would just sit there and you could count to maybe 5 or 10, and then suddenly they would like move and do it, and everything would be fine. So it's like the game gets caught up trying to process something or make a decision. That happens infrequently, but often enough that you're like, oh, okay. And it usually when it happens, I don't know what's causing it, but it'll be centralized on that particular mission. So you're not going to see it mission after mission after mission. You're going to have one mission where it starts happening, and it basically keeps happening until you finish that mission. So there definitely are a couple little things they need to fix. But just to kind of wrap up my thoughts so I don't end up talking for like 30 minutes and just rambling in circles, I will say that I think this game is a very good start. I really hope Gasket Games supports the game going forward. I see the potential for a really solid game in this. I think if they could expand the story to really flesh out what they kind of explain, because they suggest a lot of history between all of the characters, and that you're kind of getting to know them once they're already a bit established and they've already been dealt like a dramatic defeat. And so it'd be nice to learn more about, you know, how they were defeated, and it'd be nice to really get to see them also grow more powerful. Anyway, I need to get to it. The ultimate positives about the game: voice acting, absolute top tier. I thought the voice acting was fantastic. Second, the lore. Oh my gosh, so on maps there's a very high chance that you'll see chests, which when you always want to grab those because they'll have loot in them, always 3 items of certain rarity, which can be like units or war gear or abilities or spells, which are called Divine Axe. And sometimes there's also, or maybe just a lore urn, and these little urns have a single page of lore. The lore is fantastic. Not only is it extremely accurate, I never came across a piece of lore that I looked and went, nah, that's not right. Every time I listen to it, also they're all fully voice acted, which is fantastic. There are 4 pages about every single character in the game, which there are 3 named characters per faction that you can collect. Those are all great. And then there's also 20 pages of lore about certain subjects. So if you're playing as Nurgle, for instance, you can get 20 pages of lore about this crazy Nurgle prophet who rambles about a lot of subjects. But the thing that they did that's really clever is the lore isn't just copy-pasted from an army book or a battle tome. They went through the effort of keeping the lore accurate while also having it written from the perspective of the person narrating. So when you're dealing with this Nurgle prophet guy, he's telling you a lot of accurate information, but it's all from his perspective. So he doesn't know everything, but what he tells you is mostly accurate, and he talks about a lot of fascinating stuff, but from a really interesting and cool perspective. I don't know who did the writing for this game, but they killed it. Probably the biggest disappointment for me wasn't, like, the biggest negative was that the game didn't go as far as I wanted it to. I was genuinely losing my mind over how excited I was in the first campaign for all 3 races, and then when I got to the second campaign, realized it was just a higher difficulty, I was deeply disappointed. But carrying on, the customization systems are frankly fantastic. There is a functioning army painter that is very easy to use and can have dramatic effect. I think it has somewhere between 70 to 80 different colors, metallics and regulars, and also some like neon colors, and it allows you a just shocking amount of customization on most units. There's a handful of units that for whatever reason don't change color. For instance, if you're playing as the Nighthaunts, the Mirmorn Banshees are basically impossible to change their color, which is a little weird, but I was able to create some very cool looking armies. So if you really want to mess around with that, it actually looks great. The graphics, for the most part, I think are really good. The camera can be a little wonky sometimes, especially if you try and zoom all the way in or zoom all the way out. It can like do this weird thing where it shakes. But those would be the big positives for me. I thought the narrative was great. The voice acting is great. All of the lore stuff is fantastic, and it covers a lot of really lesser known stuff as well that I thought was cool. The customization is amazing, and the battle system is very fun and rewarding. Sometimes some battles will be a little simple, but especially if you're playing on some of the higher difficulties, you really got to know what you're doing. And this game will not hold your hand. It almost is a little too much when it comes to expecting you to figure things out. I would heavily recommend every single time you encounter a new ability or a new unit, click on it and then right click on it so that you can read its entire synopsis, essentially, where it tells you what all of its abilities are and all that stuff, because you will run into scenarios where you think you have a good handle on it, and then there's some wombo combo the AI pulls off and it just obliterates your face. So ultimately, I would say this game was very pleasing, in my opinion. I would give it a very positive review. However, I do think it's overpriced right now. If they were to come out and finish the narrative, clean up the few bugs, and also fix a couple of issues. For instance, probably one of my biggest beefs with the game is that the lore pages don't lock off once you've acquired them. So if you're collecting lore pages like me, and you're like, oh, I want to be a completionist and get all the lore, well, you're going to run into a problem, because whenever you pick up a lore urn, it gives you a random page, regardless if you've gotten it before or not. They really need to fix that. It is very frustrating to be playing through a campaign and trying to get lore pages, and you just keep getting ones you've already gotten over and over and over. They really need to fix that and just make it where, hey, if I've got a lore page, I can't get that one anymore because I already have it. The other big issue that I think they need to fix is that whenever you're going into a new campaign or you're switching around equipment on your units, it will tell you that a piece of equipment is equipped, but it won't tell you who has it equipped, which can be really frustrating when you're playing later in the game and you have tons of units and tons of items equipped on all sorts of different guys, and you're trying to say, okay, I want this ability on this unit, but I want to take it from someone I'm not using right now, but I have no idea who all has this item. Because whenever it has because you'll get duplicates all the time, which is fine. But yeah, I will be playing it on stream to demonstrate the game and talk more in depth about it. But I did want to just kind of come out and just get my thoughts out on everything. I do think that many of you will enjoy the game. I would recommend picking it up on sale. I do not think it's worth $40 right now. I think you could confidently get it at $30. I think I would have been pleased at $30. Obviously, I received a free copy thanks to the developers over at Gasket Games. But I think for most people, unless you're just really into Age of Sigmar and you're thinking, oh, an army painter, and I get to see like the units moving and stuff, and they have beautiful voice acting, and all the voice acting is also very lore accurate and relevant. Like, I love the Nighthawks because they're all like moaning about the various eternal punishments Nagash has inflicted on them, and it's right on. Like, this is some of the best respect to lore I've seen in a game in a really long time. But anyway, it's not a perfect game though. It does have some issues. I really hope they stick with it. I hope they repair some of the issues. And if people are really interested, I would be happy to make a much more in-depth video where I really break everything down. But for this review, I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts on it. So hopefully that's enough to intrigue you and give you enough information to make a decision. Like I said, I will be streaming this game later today over on Twitch, and once I'm done playing that stream, I will put the VOD here where everybody can watch it. So that's going to be it for me on this particular subject. I do think Stormground is a legitimately good game. It is not one of the cursed IPs that Games Workshop seems to throw out every single month, it feels like. And it has, if they can fix the issues with it and release some more races, I really could see this game being a lot of fun. It does have a multiplayer. I haven't really been able to explore that because early access, I didn't know anybody else that was in it that I was aware of. But yeah, so hopefully that can answer y'all's questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section. I'll try and get to them. And I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.